Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today I've got a first impressions on a new old Spyderco. What we're looking at is the Spyderco Tenacious. Now there's a lot of love out there for the Tenacious, and I get a lot of hate on the video I made a few years ago because I'm not a huge fan of the Tenacious, frankly. But this is new and it's interesting, and so I wanted to go ahead and check it out. So there you go. This, of course, is the Spyderco Tenacious. It's not the standard version. Normally the Tenacious is going to have G10 scales, HCR 13 MOV blade steel, and it's going to cost around $52. Can be a little bit more, and in Canada it can be considerably more. The Tenacious is not a terrible knife, but over the years what's happened is Spyderco's budget line just really hasn't kept pace with what everybody else is doing, and so because of that, the Tenacious, I feel like, is just kind of, it's lost in the sea of budget liner lock folders, right? It's not quite as good as something like the Rat Model 1, and so it has kind of lost its preferred place. However, the Tenacious is a pretty interesting knife. When I first got into knives, it was all about the Tenacious. It was a budget option from Spyderco, and in fact, in some cases, they could even be a little bit hard to get your hands on. Now, I've had a few, and they're definitely okay, right? In fact, the Ambitious was my very first Spyderco, and that's from the Tenacious line. Since then, I have had a Tenacious, and again, I don't mind it. I would have probably picked up a Resilience, but I don't know. I just, because I didn't really love the Tenacious, I felt like the Resilience was just a bigger version of a knife that I already didn't love, and so I've never really bothered with it. Anyway, now we have a Tenacious in S35Vn steel and blue FRN handles. Now, there's also a Tenacious lightweight with black FRN that still has the same 14 or HCR 13 MOV blade steel. All right. So there are a few versions out there. I will point out these cost like $98 compared to $52 for the standard version. So that's going to be something considerable. And the other thing about that, when you get to that $100 price point, there's a lot more competition. So you maybe could go with an Endura Delica. You could push just a little bit more. Like the Manix 2 lightweight is only 105 or something like that. So, it becomes a little more difficult. Anyway, I was pretty curious about this. I want to check it out. I kind of want to go through it with you. I've given you a bit of background already. The main thing that I'll say about this is if you're familiar with the Tenacious, right? If you've got a Spyderco Tenacious in G10 and HCR 13 MOV, then you know all about this knife. It feels very much like the original, fairly comfortable. The action is fairly similar to the original, which is, not great. If I try to Spidey flick this, I can do it, but I've got to put quite a bit of emphasis behind it. Okay, it rolls open pretty easily. Of course, I haven't moved this yet. This is, I literally just took this out of the box. So the clip, obviously, I will move to a right side tip up carry. But for now, it's going to be in this configuration. Now, the other thing I'll say is I will also spend some time with this to see if I can, I'll take it apart, clean it up, and lubricate it and see if I can't improve that action just a little bit. In terms of size and weight, this is 3.7 ounces. I think the standard Tenacious is around 4 ounces. Okay, so it is, a little bit lighter, but not really noticeably lighter. The FRN feels a little bit different. Again, if you've played with the multi-directional FRN from Spyderco, you kind of know how this feels in hand. And if you've got a Tenacious or you've held a Tenacious in the past, you kind of know how the ergonomics are. Obviously, this one will change a little bit. I can feel that clip in that configuration. It will obviously be moving to a different position. So that's the quick rundown. I guess I should give you a size on this. The size, if you've forgotten, I know that the Tenacious is very, very common, so most of you will know all these numbers or at least be somewhat familiar. This is just under 8 inches, so 7 3/4 inches, 3 3/8 on the blade, 4 7/16 when it's closed. All right, 3 5/8 grip area, so a little bit cramped on the grip area there. That's one of the things I didn't love about this. And 3.7 ounces, which I already mentioned. The lock bar is quite accessible. All right, the blade is not going to drop shut. It's not really, that kind of a knife. The S35VN is a nice upgrade. Um, and so I will say, it's nice to see a better steel on the Tenacious, although I wish all they had done is gone from HCR 13 MOV and bumped it up to 14C28N, or one of the, there's a bunch of budget steels out there that perform pretty well. Even 9CR 18 MOV is quite a big step up from 8CR 13. And I'm trying to think of the one they used on the Civivi Elementum, but I can't. 10CR 15 maybe, which again is a bit of a bump up. So that would have been perhaps more compelling to me than jumping all the way to S35VN. But I will say this, if you're a big fan of the Tenacious, if you carry a Tenacious all the time and it's just one of your favorite knives and it just agrees with you in every way, then this will make a lot of sense. You'll get your favorite knife, but you'll get better edge performance out of that S35VN steel. And Spyderco, by all accounts, does a nice job. So that's my first impression. It's a Tenacious. It really is. They haven't improved anything else other than the blade steel. It is a Tenacious in every way. Just literally swap that blade steel out for something else. But I did want to bring in a couple of other knives here and do a bit of a comparison. So what we have here, as when we get to the $100 price point, that does put this in a bit of a different realm. So I've got a couple of knives that I want to throw in here. One being, of course, the Para 2. Now, Para 2s these days, I think, are going for around $140, maybe even $150. Spydercos sadly have been climbing in price. The Tenacious standard, I think I already mentioned, is like $52. If not, now you know. And the Manix. Now, the lightweight Manix 2 lightweight, I think, is probably around $105, which is pretty darn good. The lockback is discontinued, very hard to find. And if you do find one, they're not expensive because they're not very popular. I guess Spyderco fans just, they've got to have a knife that they can flick out. And of course, this doesn't do that, which is, anyway. This is by far my favorite version of the Manix because the ergonomics are the best. It's really, really nice in hand. And to me, that is much more important than whether or not I can flick the blade out. How it feels once the blade is out and I actually need to cut stuff. That to me seems like what should be prioritized. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside. Let's do a quick comparison between these. So we have S35VN here. You can, of course, get Para 2s in S30V or S110V, and that's not including, the multiple sprints that are out there. So then we have the S35VN Tenacious, which is also available in HCR 13 MOV. And finally, we have the Manix here. The lockback is only going to be available in S30V, but if you go outside of that, then it's available in S110. It's available, I think there's also, I'm going to forget, CTS BD1, I think there might be a version of the Manix, and certainly there was one in the past. So blade steels are going to be varied. S35VN, yes, is probably, excuse me, probably a little nicer in terms of performance, toughness especially. S30V can be a little chippy, although I will say this, in a folding knife, toughness is not, it's a folding knife by definition doesn't need to be that tough because it already folds, okay? So that's something to consider. I will say, S35VN is a nice steel. It's very well done, and I'm happy to see S35VN on any knife. I'm never going to complain about that steel. It's a very good steel. In terms of size and weight, all right, as I feel each of these in hand, as I kind of give each of these a little fondle here, none of them are uncomfortable in hand. Out of these three, the Manix is going to be, for my hand at least, the most comfortable. The Para 2 is still pretty good, and the Tenacious is decent as well. Like, there's no real hot spots. There's nothing really problematic about it. All of them have a nice little thumb ramp there. All of them feel pretty good and are quite grippy. Of course, the FRN is going to feel different than the G10. And of course, there are a number of variations available. The Para 2 is going to feel pretty much the same no matter what you get. This Mannix lockback has a finer textured G10 than what you would normally get on this knife from factory. And of course, there's an FRN version as well. Man, there's a lot of, I have to qualify everything I say because there are like 6 different or more versions of all the knives we're looking at. Now, the problem or the question becomes, with all of the availability that exists out there and the options that are there, is should this be your first Spyderco? If you've got a Tenacious, should you upgrade to this, or should you, if you're going to spend $100, is it better to go with a Mannix or a Para 2? And I think for most people, you're going to need to get these knives in hand. That's really essential if you're on a very, very close comparison, when you're really on the fence and not sure what to do. You gotta give those knives a chance to see what they feel like in hand. There are some factors though that I think you might want to consider. So compression lock, ball lock normally, okay, this has the lock back and liner lock. Out of those, the liner lock is probably my least favorite, okay, although I'm not going to get into a big lock strength discussion. The ball lock or the back lock are probably going to be strongest, but a folding knife lock is like an extra safety element. You should treat all folding knives as if they are slip joints. So in that regard, it's hard to make a distinction. The way they've done the backlock on any Spyderco backlock I've had is always very, very impressive. I will say I like this quite a bit better than the Endura Delica, but they're always decent. The action here on the Tenacious, again, is okay. I can Spidey flick it, but it did take me a little bit of time. I'm hoping I can improve that action over time. And then finally, everyone loves the action on the Para 2 because it's just a really snappy detent. It's an enjoyable lock to fidget with. And that's considerable as well. And I mean, some people that's going to be a major deal for, others not so much. So in the comparison out of all of these, if I had to pick one, I would be picking the Mannix. It feels so good in my hand that, I like the look of it. I like the feel of it. It's just a great knife all around. Second place would be the Para 2, and third place would be the Tenacious. I get it though if that's not the way you feel about it. All right, there's definitely a diversity of opinion here, and the Tenacious is a little bit cheaper than these other two. All right, for me, I would say save up the extra money, but that's not going to be everybody's philosophy on this. And again, I'll reiterate the one point that I already made. If the Tenacious is your very favorite knife, if you love everything about it and you've carried one for years and you don't want to change, but you'd like to upgrade the blade steel, this is a perfect knife for you, right? Otherwise, if you're just kind of coming back to the Tenacious and thinking, well, maybe with better steel, I'd like it more, I would say there are probably better options out there, because really this is just a Tenacious with better steel. There's no significant difference in any other area. So there you go, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. We will talk to you soon.